Hi, and welcome to MindShifters Radio with the Forgiveness Doctor, Dr. Michael Ryce. I'm Jeanie Ryce, your co-host, and today is Friday, it's Aramaic Friday, and it's February the 21st, 2014. Our call-in number is 646-200-4169. Press 1, and that puts you in queue to talk to us, and we would love to hear your comments and your questions because that makes this your show. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, dear heart. It's awesome to have the privilege to get to join with everybody who across the globe chooses to engage in the understanding of the ancient Aramaic technology of forgiveness. Pretty deep subject to enter into, and I certainly appreciate the technology that allows us to do this on a daily basis, and to have a conversation with someone who might be in Sweden. I don't think Peter's going to be listening today. I talked to him a couple of days ago, and he was heading off to India to do a retreat. But if we've got somebody in Australia and somebody from the Middle East and somebody from Asia, it's really quite incredible. As we sit here in Costa Rica, working through a radio station in New York to talk to everybody, it's an amazing privilege. And I assume that Dale Allen Hoffman is still in Asheville, North Carolina, where we got to spend a little bit of time with him on Monday before we got on a plane to come to Costa Rica. And Dale Allen Hoffman's website, of course, is daleallenhoffman.com. And he's got some awesome materials, packages of materials to become engaged in a deeper understanding of the Aramaic. And Dale, let's see, was it 95, the first workshop that you came to? And so I think it's pretty awesome to still have a connection with you and to be watching what you're doing in the world. It's amazing how many people, we just, actually there's a group called RUCA group in Chicago that's working on bringing the work, taking everything and putting it into a format that can be taken into businesses, and we acknowledge everyone doing that. And then there's Mitzi, who's doing this project of synchronizing the presence of love in every person who's aware that that's a possibility and setting up a web project with it. There are so many people, you know, we've heard from across the globe that are really just taking this to heart and moving it into more and more lives. So it's a pretty fabulous undertaking to be engaged in, and we appreciate everybody who chooses to join with us. One of the things we have added to our calendar recently that we'll be doing is there's a conference called the Spiritual Unity of Nations, and it's going to happen in Grand Rapids, Michigan, of all places, but we're going to be keynoting there in October. If you are in that area, put that on your calendar. We're going to be doing a keynote in Spiritual Unity of Nations Conference. And of course, the intensive that we have scheduled here in Costa Rica starts on March the 7th, and we're kind of sitting on the cusp of whether or not that workshop's going to go, whether there's enough people who've registered to move it forward. So if you're thinking about doing that, let us know within the next 24 hours, because we'll probably be making that choice within that 24 hours. And of course, we've also got our schedule. We've got 56 days, I think it is actually 66, with the Food Fund Forgiveness and Work Project this summer. And the Food Fund Work and Forgiveness Project will start in July, and it'll be a 10-day project. Ari will be coming into some awesome new recipes, both cooked and raw, for that particular workshop. We'll be doing work projects during the day on the property, and of course, for those who might not be familiar with it, we've got Heartland. It consists of about 17 acres and 15 buildings. One of the projects we'll probably be doing is the replacing of the roof that collapsed under the snow load a month or so ago, and so there's lots happening in that regard, but we'll be doing some awesome food with Ari. We'll be doing work projects on the property to get it ready for the summer intensives, and then we'll step into workshops in the evening and do mind shifters and still point breathing on Saturday. So if you want to join us for that, jump on the website, www.whyagain.org, and just look under Heartland schedule, and that'll give you the intensive season schedule. We've got, after that 10 days is complete, we've got another 56 days that we'll be moving forward with a new intensive, a 16-day codependence communication practicum, a new intensive we've never done before. And then we'll be doing a 17-day or 16-day laws of living, a 9-day why is this happening to me again, a 17-day teacher training. So we've got lots happening at Heartland. We'll be delighted to have you come and join us. And we're sitting with a gentleman right now here in Costa Rica in our little apartment in San Jose. Do you know the way to San Jose? Well, now we know. And it was quite a trek for us, but yes, it's not California. And so we'll look forward to hearing from Dale. And let's say a quick hello to Dr. Tim if he's with us today. I'm sure being Aramaic Friday, Dr. Tim will be there. Anything to share from your angle, Dr. Tim?
Are you there? Can you hear me?
We be here. We can hear you loud and clear.
Wonderful. Well, I'm delighted to be here, and I'm looking forward to having Dale on. There was a call on Tuesday when you were traveling, and I forget our friend's name from Florida, who is, she's Arabic or Aramaic, and her origins, and she was asking one of the roots of one of the words. Rashida, and it was,
yes.
She called in because we're experts in Aramaic, and I had to correct her. we have access to an expert or two in Aramaic, but so hopefully she will call back today when Dale is here. And I'm blanking right now on the word that she wanted to know the roots of, whether it was Rakma or Ruka Dakuja, but that will be delightful. And I've just continued to get wonderful comments about the sharing from the support group on Tuesday, and that beautiful blog entry. I sent it to Jeanie, and I have a request from the woman who wrote it that if Jeanie gets it posted on the website, that she send me the link so I can send it to that woman so she knows where it's posted.
Certainly. That's going to go on today.
Wonderful. Did you ever get
And it's
access?
interesting. Go ahead.
Well, I'll save that for another time. It's what's interesting. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, the procedure that was used to bring this work forward into the world, there were 25 translators that worked on the original translation work, and once the 25 translators agreed that this was the meaning of a word, then the task I took, and why I'm not an expert in Aramaic, as a director of the foundation, I'm not allowed to speak, read, or write the language so that my own prejudices don't come in, but my job was to take what the translators brought us and put it in the laboratory of the classroom. Did it work? So the translation was not considered verified until it actually worked and produced the result. So, all the scholars in the world can sit around and argue in their brains about the meaning of a word, but if you take what the word describes as a how-to and you put, does it work? And if it doesn't, then it would be back to the drawing board. This obviously is not a correct translation. And of course, we can translate words perfectly and not have a clue what somebody meant. All you have to do is say to somebody they're cool and talk about their low body temperature, and you realize that cool is an idiom, and there are many, many idioms in the Aramaic language, and maybe that would be a place for Dale to start today on the whole idea of idioms. Dale, welcome, sir.
Did you say to talk about idiots? Is that what you were asking?
I don't know any of those, Dale. Do you?
Well, I won't answer that question. No, I'm kidding. But, well, idioms, wow. Well, sheesh, where do you start? It's a funny thing that I've been saying this over and over again the last few weeks, that a lot of people really don't realize that, especially here in the West, people, for the most part, overwhelmingly are relating with the Yeshua teachings, the Jesus teachings from a 16th, 17th, 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th century Middle English perspective, not realizing that a lot of the words they're using, phrases like washed in the blood of Christ, grace, Lord, verily, assuredly, all these different words did not exist 2,000 years ago. And doesn't mean that the King James Bible isn't something that's, beautifully poetic, but that also doesn't mean that it's incredibly accurate. Idioms are one of those things that really can muck the joint up if you don't understand what it is that you're looking at. And I think that all credit must go to, for me, the one that I feel opened that up in the West was, of course, George Lambza with books like The Kingdom on Earth and, of course, his Aramaic Bible, because he started getting things across that people hadn't thought about before. And I mean, if you've got a specific one that maybe we could talk about, we can go in some sort of particular direction. A lot of people don't realize that. They just don't think about the fact that, well, I mean, it's everything that you're teaching too, in that you're looking at the words on the page and you're relating through the concepts in your mind, not necessarily the concepts of what something originally meant. And then, of course, you come down to the challenge of finding out what it originally meant. It's a little bit of a challenge.
Well, Dale, how about eat my body and drink my blood?
Oh, that's so nice, isn't it? Well, there's a lot of beauty. It's unfortunate that the Eucharist has sort of been lost in the heavy ritual of it, people not realizing that. First of all, that word blood is dama or dama, and what it actually means is it's blood, juice, wine, sap, or essence. And what's important for people to realize, first of all, is that if he would have said that, drink my blood, or eat my body, let's just focus on blood first. If he was saying drink my blood, first of all, if you look at that in a modern context, that's a pretty bizarre statement, unless you're some sort of wacky, way out there, sort of on the fringe, who knows what you would call that. That's kind of a weird statement. That word dama, though, or dama, I've spoken about it on the show many times, is a word that means blood, juice, wine, sap, or essence. And that's one of the things that I've really come into great realizations with over the years through the work of Albert LaChance, who I've done so many things with, is this deeper understanding of Eucharist and the eating of the body, the drinking of the blood. It's funny to put it that way. But just a couple of weeks ago in New Jersey, we did a weekend retreat called Awakening the Cosmic Christ, Embracing the Third Covenant. Albert and I, with a couple dozen people, excuse me, we ended Sunday morning with Eucharist. And when you literally get it across to people that, in fact, what's happening there, first of all, we have to take our focus off of Jesus the man and let go of the entire thought of us drinking someone's blood or eating someone's body, and realize that, like as an example, in Mark 14, Matthew 26, Luke 22, there's 3 different places in the 4 canonical Gospels, and I think it's in Corinthians as well. There's much deeper realizations of what he was saying there. And when you realize that, as an example, let's look at the body. First of all, when Yeshua would use the word body, in Aramaic, that word body was pagra. And basically what pagra means is corpse. He would never call his temple his body. He would actually, in fact, only call, when he was speaking of a physical body, he was always calling the body the temple, which is haikla, means conscious energy. But when you start thinking about something like bread, let's just look at the bread without even going deep into the Aramaic, that when you lift bread in front of your face, it was so profound a couple of weeks ago because we've got that pita bread, and it was Ezekiel bread. It was good, clean, pure bread, sprouted at that too. And you put that in front of your nose and you let in the scent, and you become very aware of the water and the earth and the seed and the work of human hands, the farmer, the rain, the sun. You start looking deeper into the life systems, almost much in the way that Buddhism would, and you're conscious of that as that actually goes into your mouth. And also in terms of the blood, it's interesting that, first of all, it does not say wine. It actually says fruit of the vine in Aramaic. It doesn't say wine specifically. It doesn't say it has to be fermented. It just says fruit of the vine, and that's been touched by human hands, through the work of human hands. When you realize what you're actually doing is consuming the body of Allah, you're consuming the one, you're consuming everything with that food, and when you're drinking in that essence, that would be the breath, the spirit. That's the almost like the rucha within everything, and when you do it on that kind of a level, it hits you in ways, or the realization comes through in ways that for me, I can't do that and not have tears welling up in the corners of my eyes when you can do it with that kind of consciousness, as opposed to, you know, you do it every morning because you're supposed to do it every morning, or whatever it may be within someone's belief systems, or maybe it's just once a week, and they do it because they were told that the action is what it's all about. But the key is really in that word blood, dhamma, which means essence. When you realize the essence of what it is you're doing, and you're doing it from a place of presence rather than from a place of talking about a physical action, it comes into a whole new level of being. And we talked about it a couple weeks ago when we were talking about the 2 commandments. When Yeshua would talk about the first law, love the Lord your God with all your heart, your mind, your soul, your willingness, virtue, strength, and then he would say the second law that is like it is love your neighbor as yourself. When he would say that is like it, the word that is like it in Aramaic is dhamma, the dhamma, which is the same word as blood. It means essence. The second law is the essence of the first. And when you start looking at it like that, even the word Adam, Adamos, in several languages literally means Adam is the essence of God. It means earth. It literally means red blood, red earth, clay. It's basically the realization, much like with the bread that's coming to your mouth, that we came from the earth. In the third beatitude, when you let go of who you think you are, you realize not only that you inherit the earth, but you realize you are the earth. That's who we are. And the original intent of Eucharist, including in the Catholic Church, was that deep cosmic realization of that oneness. Am I still on?
So then eat my body and drink my blood is you've got to integrate and absorb everything that I'm telling you. It's got to become part of you as opposed to some kind of a ceremony.
That's exactly it. And as a matter of fact, if you do the ceremony in that way, as an example, there was a guy just in the past week who died from doing the snake dancing, dancing with serpents, and he died.
Yes.
Now, without going into judgment about the guy, what I will say is this. That's the very thing that Yeshua was basically speaking consciously from the opposite realm of that. That's something that would be considered something from the mask, something that's showy. Bless the guy's heart, whatever. You want to dance with snakes, do whatever you need to do. But understand, that's not what it meant to pray in your closet. Closet in Aramaic, it's the word talanach, which means the center. Pray from the center. When you're out there and you're spitting out the words, much like the Pharisees were in the Gospels, and you're mouthing the words, or you're doing something outward in a showy way rather than coming from that center, then, of course, it becomes about the physical action. And then people obsess and they say, wow, look at that. Look what he can do. He can dance with serpents. So one thing I can say, I don't know where the guy was coming from with it, but in another way I could say, for me, I wouldn't myself be able to see it in any way other than something coming from the ego or the mask. But, who knows? That's a real big thing in Tennessee, the next state over for me. They're still dancing with serpents.
Well, let's talk about the idiomatic aspect of you'll be able to handle snakes.
Snake is an interesting word in Aramaic, snake or serpent. First of all, I will say this. In the phrase where it actually says that about handling serpents, it's actually talking about snakes in that way. But what I will say is this. Whenever you hear things like Moses raising up the serpent in the desert, Yeshua raising up the serpent in the desert, that original temptation in the Garden of Eden, of course that word nachash or serpent there's a lot of layers in this one, and there's so many ways we can go in this. That word serpent in Hebrew is nachash. That's what shows up in the garden. What nachash actually means is not necessarily just a snake. What nachash means is cupidity or original attraction. What that means is essentially an energy, consciousness, awareness, essence that only knows itself. And when you try to break it apart from itself, as an example, saying this is that and this is that, Or, of course, you've got Adam and Eve naked in the garden, and they're not ashamed, and God is present, and then all of a sudden, man, there's so many deep ways I can get into this that I kind of am almost holding back on the phone because I don't want to lose people. But let me put it in a very simple way. I've got a CD called Realization of the Christ Within that goes very, very deep into this whole serpent thing and what that meant, and in the garden, or at least the layers of its meaning. Adam and Eve, first it was Eve, the feminine, the awareness, the spiritual, the perception aspect of the human that took the bite out of the apple. And it doesn't actually say apple in Hebrew. What it actually says is a fruit tree bearing fruit whose seeds are contained within itself. Now, what's interesting about that is that could be an apple, it could be a fig, but also if you look deeper, it's not actually something that is necessarily just speaking about a specific kind of fruit. Like I say, I'm sort of not wanting to open this up completely because I don't want people to get lost, but those phrases from the beginning of Genesis actually form a flow pattern, and you can actually use the characters from the beginning of the Torah to create a flow pattern, and that flow pattern that it actually creates is an apple. An apple is also a smoke ring. It's called a torus. And what a torus is, it's the most efficient flow pattern that any energy can take in the manifest universe. As an example, if you blow a smoke ring and just kind of, and I'm not a smoker, nor have I ever been, and that smoke ring goes out, it's something that keeps moving and it keeps moving and it keeps moving, and it sort of kind of collapses back in on itself and keeps moving forward. Now, what's interesting is today, we know that that's also the flow pattern of the universe. We know, of course, by looking at an apple, if you look at an apple and you take a step back from it, you're actually going to see something that, again, looks like a smoke ring. It collapses down in on itself. Of course, its seeds are at its center, and it's something that's in a state of flow from seed to fruit, or seed to tree to fruit, back down to the earth, seed, tree, fruit, back down to the earth. It's part of the tree of life. Now, when Eve took the bite of the apple, when you're looking at that in Hebrew, which I believe is like maybe Genesis 1:14 or so, or maybe it's 1:11, what you're looking at there is the feminine or the spiritual or the awareness aspect of the human taking one little bite out of the perspective of the whole. What that fruit represented was everything. It represented the entire cosmos, universe, God, everything as one singular process of being. And when I say cosmos, I don't just mean, the Milky Way galaxy. I don't just mean our universe, and I don't mean even multiverses. What I'm saying is everything. That was a representation of everything. And by her taking that bite out, she just took her own little bite, her own little perspective out of the whole. So now all of a sudden Eve is no longer just I, but now she's I am. And it's amazing that, think of that flow pattern again. Ramesh Balsekar said that what the scientist calls the Big Bang, the mystic calls the sudden arising of awareness. In other words, from the pure I of spirit of oneness to the I am. In other words, I am Dale. And of course, she hands it over to Adam. It had to be the feminine that took the first bite, not because women are dumb, but because the feminine is that part that's the open flow. She takes that one little chunk, essentially falls asleep, and gives it over to Adam. He takes his little chunk, falls asleep, never does it say that he actually woke up. But what happens is all of a sudden she has her perspective, he has his perspective. It's no longer I and one with God. Now it's I am me, I am Adam, I am Eve. And of course, when the presence comes back into the garden, they're naked and they have to cover up because they're ashamed. Why do they have to cover up? Because they now consider themselves to be separate. And what's interesting is going back to that serpent of light, Nachash, the cupidity or the original attraction. Visualize in your mind that I've got a 50,000 volt power line in my hands, and I'm able to break that power line in half like some great, Marvel superhero, and take the two parts of the power line, break it into two separate huge cables, and then there's a little gap in the middle there between the one side of the cable and the other. What's going to show up there in that cable, when you've got electric going on both sides, what shows up in the gap? A serpent of light. It's an energy, in other words, much as God is, the essence of everything, is an energy and essence awareness. It's something that only knows itself. And the more you try to deny that it only knows itself, whatever you put in the middle of that, in other words, hostility and fear, is what cuts it in half. That's what rips that power line into two. The more intense you try to not look at and or process your hostility and fear, the more kinetic energy you put into that spring of not feeling it, the more intense that serpent in the middle becomes. And, of course, the more intense you try to push it down, the more you start to suffer because you're resisting a process that only knows itself. It's literally God trying to reunify with God, and the only reason there's not a reunification, in fact, everything's always united, it's actually our perception. It's us plus our mask, us plus the pain body, us plus the ego that causes that separation, the false self, what Yogananda would call the pseudo-soul. Now there's another, I know I'm going fast here, everybody can listen back to the recording. There's another, in Mark 9, 47 through 50, there's phrases where it talks about, Yeshua says, he talks about, if your eye offend thee, he talks about the hand, the eye, and the foot. He says, if your eye offend thee, pluck it out. Better that you enter into the kingdom of God with one eye than to have two eyes and be cast into what was translated as hellfire in the King James. If you look at the New International Version of the Bible, which is really far off, the NIV actually says thrown into hell. Now, in Aramaic, that word's Gehenna, which is just the city trash dump. This is, again, an idiom, or it's a metaphor, but I'm not going to focus on the word Gehenna right now. What I'm going to focus on is actually a word a little bit later. That's the word for worm. Funny, because it says right there, where their worm does not die and their fire does not go out. What's interesting about that word worm in Aramaic, the word is taulehun, and what taulehun actually means is a worm, a serpent, or a dragon, a serpent of light that consumes its own tail and emits either fire or light. In Greek, the word is Ouroboros or Ouroboros. In Latin, it's Ouroboros. Okay? Now, if you've ever seen depictions online or in books, you'll actually see a snake, a serpent, a dragon, or even a light being, like a light serpent, that is in a circle and its tail is in its mouth because it's consuming its own tail. Now, the belief in Aramaic, in ancient Aramaic, in the Galilean, was that this process of, you could almost call it like a circle of life, that it's a realization of the oneness of life. In that case, it would be emitting light. Okay. Now, what would that mean? That would mean, let's say I'm a parent or a grandparent, and I pick up my child or grandchild, and I'm holding this baby, and I'm talking within, as Michael would say, the first 20 minutes of life. I'm holding this living, breathing being in my hand. And, of course, in that moment, I'm very aware of that circular, cyclical nature. Again, think smoke ring, think apple, that tree of life. I'm very aware of the oneness of that circular flow of life, because here is my child, my grandchild, etc. It's life moving on. What I feel in that moment is light, okay? And I feel presence. I'm feeling conscious, active presence, love. Welcome to heaven. On the other hand, let's look at it in a different way. If you look at it on the other side, same experience, in other words, the same light, same serpent, etc. But in this case, I'm holding that baby in the first 20 minutes of life and then cancel the thought it has some kind of a birth defect and the children dies. Now, how do you feel? Again, you're still aware of the cyclical nature of life, that circle, the tree, the smoke ring, the apple, the fig, whatever it may be, whatever the metaphor, the idiom is. You're still aware of the cyclical nature, but what happens is now fear has set in. It could be hostility about doctors. Who knows what it could be? Fear and hostility set in. You put something in the middle between the tail and the mouth of the serpent, so to speak, and I start to say, I don't want to feel this. So by not wanting to feel this, I push back on my feelings and my emotions in that moment. I don't want to feel that fear. I don't want to own it, I don't want to take responsibility for it, and I push back. When I push back, what happens is no longer does this serpent seem to be emitting light anymore. Now what it seems to be emitting is fire, because now I'm in a state of suffering. And I love that title Michael came up with his book, The End of Suffering. That is this exact same energy. It's still the light of God. It's still the presence of the One. But when you put hostility and fear into the mix, into what Yeshua would call the doorway or the portal, you put it into that, you put hostility and fear in there, you put a veil in the doorway or portal, then what happens is whatever it is you put in the middle of that is going to have to burn up. It has to burn up because it's not real. It's not what Michael would call actuality. It's simply our reality. And the more intentionally you push against that, the more you're going to burn. And it's funny because if you look in the King James in Mark 9:47 through 50, what it says is, "Where their worm does not die and their fire does not go out." Now, that word worm, again, that's taulehun. It's the Ouroboros or the Ouroboros. But it's interesting how in the King James it actually says, I'm actually walking over here so that I'm not misquoting. It actually says, let me look at it here. It actually says in Mark 9 in the King James, what it says is, "For every one shall be salted with fire," here's an idiom, "and every sacrifice shall be salted with salt." And then here comes my favorite line in the entire King James. "Salt is good, but if salt have lost his saltness, wherewith will you season it? Have salt in yourselves and have peace with one another." Well, that's very bizarre. I will say this, what salt means in ancient Aramaic is to be thirsty. In other words, from Rumi, don't look for water, be thirsty. Salt means to be open, essentially, to keep yourself open to the infinite. Now, it's interesting how here in the King James it says, "Everyone shall be salted with fire, and every sacrifice shall be salted with salt." If I come over to the Aramaic, what it actually says, "For everything will be vaporized with fire, and every sacrifice will be seasoned with salt." Very interesting, much different. That word in the first case where it says vaporize in the Aramaic is netmluk. In the second case in Aramaic, it's tetmluk. When you've got the tumluk sound is the same in both cases. It's the same root. When you've got the nun, which is like an N before it as a prefix, it means not salted, but in fact vaporized. It was a mistranslation going into the Greek. Once it went into the Greek, it was gone forever, because by the time it got into Latin and English, it was already gone. It had been gone for about 1,500 years at that point. First case, the N sound means vaporized. And in the second case, tetmluk, when you put the tet, which is like a T sound, it actually means to be seasoned, or to actually take salt and rub it into something like a piece of meat. You rub salt into a piece of meat, number one, to tenderize it, but also to make it eternal, to preserve it. So what it said here is that when you're in that light and you're in that worm, serpent, dragon, that being of light, that circle of life and light, that when you're open and you're willing to let go, whatever you bring into that light will vaporize, as opposed to whatever you consider to be a big sacrifice that you don't want to let go of, whether you're either focusing on it or resisting and trying not to think about it, that will be seasoned and it's with you forever until you're willing to forgive it and let it go. And I got one last little bit of insight I want to add to this. I know this is big. Listen back to the recording of the talk. It's really worth going into this. The other thing I wanted to say was, we're always told that fire was a bad thing. Fire's this horrible thing. What's interesting is the word Yeshua used for fire was nohrata. Now, nohra is the word for the light of the moon, okay? One thing that's unique about the light of the moon versus the light of the sun is that it's reflective. It's still the light of the sun. Now, that makes it feminine. The reflective nature makes it feminine, okay? And that word nohra is feminine. The ta sound at the end of nohrata genders that word double feminine. It's not a normal word to use in Aramaic. It's a very bizarre, very not common word. As a matter of fact, I've only ever seen it in Jesus' teachings, and only there in a few places. What's interesting about the word nofrata is it's double feminine. It's him taking a feminine word, adding another ta sound at the end to let people know, look, I am not talking about a physical fire that burns you. What I'm actually talking about is the light of your consciousness, the light of your being. In other words, the resistance that we have in those moments when we feel like we're suffering, by us not stepping in and taking responsibility and forgiving the hostility and the fear, we suffer and we burn, and it feels like a fire. When we are willing to let that light move into the deep spaces of our being, the corners of our consciousness, the shadows, etc., and we are allowing that in, it will literally vaporize and burn up, and that's when, in fact, it's light. And he said very clearly, those that are near to me are near to the nuhrata, the feminine fire, the feminine essence. Those that are far from me are far from the kingdom. And one last little bit, I know I've been going on here, another idiom in Aramaic was that the light of the sun was equivalent to the light of God. And that's something that they got in a lot of ways from the Egyptian culture, the Sumerians, etc. And one thing I ask people in my talks is, what happens, first of all, I say, actually, what's the only part of the moon that the sun chooses not to shine on? And people say the dark side, and I say that's a trick question, actually. The sun doesn't choose not to shine on anything, the sun just shines, much like the light of God, the presence of God, the presence of the one being. However, the only part that the sun can't shine on is the part of the moon that's turned away, the part that's not being forgiven, that we're not taking responsibility for. Now, I also say, what happens when you move closer to the sun? You what? You burn. What happens when you move closer to the realization of yourself as the God light? What happens when you move closer to that? Again, you burn. And whether that burning is an opening and a light, or it's a burning that's a suffering and a resistance in which you feel like you're dying and burning up, and all of us have gone through that in different times, is in direct proportion to your willingness or resistance. Willingness is the cosmic grease in Michael's words. So if you're going into that light with hostility and fear, and you're trying not to feel the hostility, or trying not to feel that hostility and fear, you're going to suffer, you're going to burn. If you go into that light through your breath, however it is you do that, with an openness, then not only will your veils burn away, but you come into a much deeper realization that, in other words, in the words of St. Francis, what you're looking for is what is looking. You are the light that you seek. Michael's been spot on ever since I first met him, exactly on that. And the deeper I go into the actual, what's written down letter by letter in Aramaic, the more deep I see that, the more I realize how much he understands it, and the more I realize 99.9% of the scholars, bless their hearts, don't have a clue what they're even looking at. And that includes hard-nosed, full-blown Semitic scholars. A lot of them don't even realize what they're looking at, unfortunately. So I will yield the floor after my 20-minute, I'm quite passionate on this, so. Whew.
That's awesome. Well, what I'd like to do, Dale, is bring it full circle to where we started with that idiom, and looking at what one eats of. What is it that's going to burn? What's going to have to go through the transmutation that, if there's resistance, will be painful. If there's no resistance, it will be absolute bliss. And that is, what did you eat of? What was the seed that you ate? You know, when you look at this body-mind unit as an energy system rather than as a physical thing, and you look at the newborn child, that absolute awesome presence of love, who introduces it to and makes it eat of the fruit of hostility and fear? You know, you look at that creation story, and they're talking about, what did she eat of? The fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. When we started to separate and categorize things, and the feminine being the executor, the executive part of the process, what you hand to the feminine aspect of your being, that aspect can only manifest, can only reflect the state of organization of that. So the person who says, you know, I don't want my child to ever speak to me disrespectfully again, they're eating of a fruit, they're eating of a vibration, and they instruct the child, don't you ever speak to me like that again. And all the child hears is, speak to me like that again. And now we've got people stuck in a cycle of what they've unconsciously eaten of, the negativity. and their language reflects it. That's why there's such a focus in laws of living on regulatory speech, because literally our speech regulates not only our emotions, our thoughts, our physiology, but literally what we manifest. So the parent who says, don't speak to me like that again, guaranteed they're going to manifest a child who will speak to them like that again, because that's the vibration, that's the frequency that they're focused on. You look at the idea of the feminine being the executor, that which executes the frequency, and what is the whole idiom of the Immaculate Conception? If we have a physiological and a genetic system that's filled with the fruit or the seed of hostility and fear, then we're going to manifest, we're going to reflect that in our relationships, in our physiology, in our physical, mental, emotional diseases, and in our world. And the Immaculate Conception was not about sexuality. It was about the feminine aspect of ourselves being cleansed of everything that we and our genetic protege, or those who came before us, ate of, that you remove, you forgive those frequencies, so that when a frequency comes in purity, it simply comes into expression in the world. The person who says, in their head says, I want a wonderful relationship, but what they've had modeled in their world is relationship is hostility, fear, it's separation, it's degrading, it's painful, it hurts. The person who never is willing to engage in forgiving, engage in opening that which is stored in their genes and in their physiology around relationship, that their hostility, fear, and pain, when they say in their heads, I want wonderful relationship, what resonates in their hearts is, relationship, hostility, fear, separation, pain, drama, and trauma. And of course, it's always the other person's fault. You listen to people who talk about their relationships, and it's always their partner's fault that there's a problem. They never did anything wrong. They're never off base. And of course, that favorite tongue-in-cheek line you've heard me use 1,000 times, you'll notice if you've been through a particular painful reality 87 different times with 42 different people, you're the only one that was there every time. And it's time for us to each begin to clean up and remove what never belonged. What we feed into the feminine aspect of ourselves has to manifest, but it will not manifest in a tainted system in purity. It will manifest with the tainted part. So the person who holds the genetics of painful relationship says wonderful relationship, and what they manifest is painful relationship. So until one can own that, until one can speak responsibly about that, they can't access the part of themselves that is manifesting in their relationships or their finances or their business or wherever it is in their world. And until we're willing to open that, and there's the salt, until we're willing to get into willingness to own and see what's the part of me that produces this result, then that result will continue to be produced. And produce it enough times, there's a lot of stored pain. And then once you realize the work that needs to be done, the fire starts, because when that pain starts to come forward, it can become literally intense, burning, searing, white heat pain in tissue, which has also been called in the East the Kundalini. When that energy starts to move, it can get pretty intense. And it's the willingness to go there and to hold the space to stay connected to that active space of love, to process through those things that becomes such a key in the whole process of healing. And when you get members of a community, you get members of a family system that come to understand that, and instead of blaming each other, instead of our classic definition that we use in this work of denial, and that is, you made me. It's only because of you that this is happening. When people undo their denial, then they have the opportunity to start to open that space where those things which are hidden can now, instead of manifesting in the external world, you go to Romans, it says, nothing will remain hidden, everything will be made known in the light of day. It always, whatever we hold manifests. They asked Yeshua, well, how do you tell where somebody's at? He said, well, just look at their fruit. Look at the results they produce. Are they producing traumatic results in their financial life? Then they've eaten of the fruit of negativity around finances. Are they producing the fruit of negative relationships? Then they've eaten of the fruit. They're manifesting that, and until they're willing, instead of pushing it outward through denial, to open the internal space to embrace that in the active presence of love, then they're always finding somebody else to blame. It's always somebody else's fault. And so to get to that point of really understanding what was being put out 2,000 years ago in the Aramaic, and to be able to embrace, the willingness to embrace the depth of the suffering, the pain, the hate, the fear, the grief, the rage. We're going to hear from a fellow, I think on Tuesday he's going to join us on our show. We're going to be talking about physical pain. And there's a gentleman we just heard from recently who's in South America, and he found the auditory, the CD on the website of The End of Suffering. And he shared with us that he's been taking 10, Jean, do you remember exactly? 40 milligram Oxycontin a day for 10 years. And that he went through that, and overnight, cold turkey, was finished with it, and he'd been taking it for back pain, and that was the end of his back pain. I think we're going to hear from him on Tuesday. So, you know, when one's willing to embrace, to open to that space, the salt, as you talk about, that idiomatic meaning, and until people get the idioms, it just seems kind of idiotic. But really, it's so powerful when you tap into what it really meant.
Wow. Well, it's time for us to do an event together, live in front of people, because, yeah, wow. Woo.
Well, let's plan on that. We'll look at the calendar. I'll get back with you, and we'll look at that when we're back in the Tennessee, Asheville area, and see what we can.
You mentioned something when you were here, when I saw you a couple days ago, something about, was it July or June? And I wrote it down, and
yeah, we're going to be
where I wrote it.
In June.
June?
The weekend of June the 8th. If we're going to be back by then, so if we wanted to put an event together that weekend, that would be awesome.
Okay, I'm gonna get it moving.
And or we may want to do a week long. We may want to do a week long residential thing.
That, you know, I might be able to. I can probably get Mountain Light Sanctuary. So here we go. The wheels are turning. Okay, I'll be in touch about it. That sounds perfect.
Well, we'll get back to get together with you on that. And in the meantime, Jeannie's got a couple of callers for us. So before we actually take our first caller.
Michael?
Yes.
Before you get into that,
go ahead, Tim.
Magda texted me that the word from a previous caller, she was asking for the Aramaic root of the word shabag. So just in case you get hooked into a caller that isn't Rashida, that was her question.
Does Rashida know what her name means?
I don't know.
I'll tell you what. I think she's on the line. She's in 561 in Florida. So let's tap her in. I think that's Rashida on the line. So 561, you're on the air. Is this you, young lady? Of course it's you, but is it Rashida?
Hi, guys. Hi, how are you guys doing?
I'm doing great.
We are blessed and highly favored. How about you, young lady?
I'm fine. Thank you so much. I think Tim was asking about the meaning of my name, if I know what it means in Arabic.
Well, I think that Dale was saying, you know what it means in Aramaic.
Well, I was asking. Well, if it was Arabic in the Aramaic, it'll usually be pretty close.
Hopefully. Yeah, in Arabic, what it means is it's a guide, like to guide. So it's a spiritual guide. That's what it means, the meaning of my name. In Aramaic, there.
Well, what's interesting about it is it's Aramaic. It's also got Rashida is it's also Egyptian as well. Actually, in Egyptian, it means like righteous or in tune with what's proper. You know, with what's a conscious thing to do. In Sanskrit, it's closer to either descended from royalty or the other aspect is like a protector, the one who sort of brings somebody under their wing, which is about the same as there's like so many different aspects of it. There's Rashika and there's Rashida. And what was it you had said that you were told about the Arabic? What was the meaning?
I was wondering about the word shbag. Like, if you could break it down for me, like in terms of the sound system. Is it the sh and then ba and then qaf, or?
Well, shbag is the past tense. The present tense or the imperative would be shabuk. Shabuk is a word that literally means to cancel something, to obliterate something. Like when I used that word earlier talking about vaporize, that's what shabuk means. Shbag means it's already happened. Shabuk means that it's going to happen. One of the things that I want to expand on that with, as an example, I think on a couple shows ago, I mentioned the word glory or magnificence, which is teshbukta. Right in the middle of the word teshbukta is the sound shabuk. The ta at the end genders it feminine, which means it's a state of being. The tish sound at the beginning is something that means like facets of a diamond or a prism, something that's like gleaming and sparkling and shining, and then that sound in the middle is shabuk. What shabuk means is that I let go of absolutely any goal I have for this moment. Anything I'm seeking out of this moment, I let go completely. I'm 100% completely open. Anything that I'm trying to get, I just let go completely and let the moment or let presence move through me is what shabuk means. So when you hear the word glory, what it means is a full presence. In other words, in this moment, that's a state of being, which is the ta, that is tesh, which means it sparkles and it gleams. In other words, what glory means is you're so fully present in this moment, in your being, and in your perception that life seems to give off a glow or a sparkle or a sheen. And that shabuk is the root there, which means literally to cancel anything outside of the moment. No goal in the moment, you're completely open. It's exactly what Michael does on the worksheet, which is what shabuk means. Cancel, leave, untie, drop, walk away from.
Okay, great. So the k sound is part of the word, right?
What's that?
The k, the last sound, the k sound, is it a k for demonstrative like you?
It could not necessarily in this case. That would only be if it's at the end of a particular word, but this is actually a root sound that'll also show up in the middle of a word. Like as you're saying, liba is heart, libak would be my heart or your heart. Not necessarily possessive in this case. So
no.
It's one of the rare cases where it's not. Yeah,
because I was just like trying to make the connection with, for Arabic we have like sabu, it's like a river, it's a river, kind of that. But the k, when you kind of talking to somebody, you would mention the k, which is kind of you, but it comes at the end.
Yeah, exactly. Which is the cop. Now, there is an aspect of that when you're saying that. I mean, what shabuk is, it's open to that flow that's only in the present moment. And that's where the canceling comes. You cancel whatever you seek from this moment so that the moment can flow through you. And that's what presence is. Presence with a capital P.
That makes sense. Yeah, because in Arabic, instead of a sh, it's a s. So I noticed everything like that. That's a s in Arabic, it's a sh in Hebrew or Aramaic, I guess.
Yeah, it gets kind of sloppy at times. It's funny because even in Aramaic, people will pronounce a kop, the letter kop, as a chet, and they'll pronounce chet as a kop, and it's like a big, huge, jumbled mess. And it's funny to hear even two people from the same region speaking either Assyrian or not so much Hebrew, that's a little more uniform, but Aramaic, it's a little bit elusive enough that, or even not so much Arabic, that I see people having to like almost translate even what the guy that lives down the road is saying, because it's kind of, it's almost like the formality is gone from the language. It's become like a little bit of a hodgepodge in a lot of ways. But I think, anybody that speaks Aramaic, Hebrew, or Arabic should be able to pick, especially Aramaic and Arabic, they're so closely related, should be able to at least pick out enough to get at least the juice or the essence of what someone's saying. But anyway.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
Silence.
Thank you for your call, dear heart. We're glad to have you on the show, and it's always wonderful to hear from you. And Jeanie has another caller, area code 417. Is this that young lady, Magda?
Yes, it is. Hi, everyone. I was just calling to say
your voice.
Yes, you too. Today is the word, and you already got that. So that was the question that Dr. Tim had at the beginning. So I looked it up on the archives. Oh, how about those archives?
Yes, and how about the people that are writing those archives and doing the service of making it available? That's awesome. Thank you.
You're so welcome. Hey, Dale, I don't know if you remember, we met years ago in Asheville, North Carolina. And I'm wondering if I could somehow get your direct email or telephone numbers, because sometimes I would like to check the spelling of some of the words that you're using on the show to make sure that I'm getting them correct in the archives.
Oh, absolutely. I can give you my email out right now. It's the easiest way to get a hold of me. It's just Dale at DaleAllenHoffman.com. It's the easiest way to get a hold of me.
Okay. I believe I tried that and I wasn't able to send a message.
Oh, you know what it is? I have problems with GoDaddy, which is my server. Let me give you a different email, which I know will get to me. Just Asheville Souls, ASHEVILLESOULS at yahoo.com.
Okay.
Because what Dale at Dale Allen Hoffman does is it forwards to the Asheville Souls one, and we actually have had problems not only with the GoDaddy server not forwarding the messages, but also that they just don't get to me in the first place, even if I go into the GoDaddy box. So we've had problems with them for years. The Asheville Souls, I should get that. So.
Great. Thank you so much.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
I'm delighted that you're doing the Friday shows this whole year. It's spectacular. So thank you very much. And I'll buzz off. There might be another caller. Blessings and love to all of you.
Well,
bye-bye.
Magda, we're down to about 2 minutes, a little less than 2 minutes. So you've got the floor. If you've got another question, you might as well throw it in. We're not going to have time for another caller.
Oh, I really don't have another question right now.
Okay.
No, I can't think of a thing. Not until I hang up, I'm sure.
Yeah, it'll come just as soon as you hang up. But all right,
exactly.
We appreciate you. Thanks for the work you do on the archives.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Michael, let's plug Dale's website and CDs. He's been very active person lately.
Yes. Tell us about some of the things you do. You've got about a minute.
Okay, I've got. I just put out a new CD called Inanna, Living from the I Am, that came out a few weeks ago. And I will say that over the next, all my CDs, you can get them on my website. You can download on Amazon, iTunes. I'm in the process of a new 6-disc program with Albert LaChance that's coming out called Awakening the Cosmic Christ. Right behind that is a 4-disc program called At the Still Point of the Turning World, about oneness, what it really means, and how to live it, with Albert, that comes out right after that. And then my focus is going to be on finishing my book, finally, and then right after that I've got a 4-disc set about Mary Magdalene and a lot of the legends, the myths, and what some of the Gnostic Gospels and some of the French stories and things say about Mary Magdalene and the suppression of the divine feminine. I've got a lot of stuff coming, put it that way.
Cool. That's awesome. And we'll have to plan for the stuff we do in June to do some recording, maybe video even. So,
oh, absolutely.
Everybody, we appreciate you for being here. Cool. We appreciate you being here. DaleAllenHoffman.com is Dale's website. And everybody give the best gift that you can to the world. Have the best year yet of your eternal life.